We're ready when you are.
Action.
All right. So today on Inside Real Estate, this is episode 46. We've got a man who doesn't need much of an introduction, but we'll let him tell you who he is. Kit Anstey. This gentleman has been in the business for quite a while, and he's a wealth of knowledge. So we're going to hope to extrapolate some of that from him today. Kit, how you doing?
Doing super fantastic. Thanks for having me. Cold day.
Yeah, for sure. So give people the quick, 50-cent intro for yourself.
Sure. Who am I? Kit Anstey. Been in the business 37 years. Currently for 28 years with Berkshire, Hathaway, HomeServices, Fox and Roach Realtors. Committed to 7 days, 24/7. If you need somebody in the real estate business, myself and my partner and my team are available. You called me a wealth of knowledge. Been very involved in real estate throughout. Past president and CEO of the Tri-County Suburban West Realtor. So giving back and always here.
Yeah, amazing. Now, you operate mainly like in the Westchester and surrounding areas, right?
Yes, we live in Westchester and do around 20 to 25 miles. We do a lot in Wayne and Downingtown, Lionville, Chadsford area, but about 20, 25 miles circumference around.
Okay. So we were briefly talking before we started rolling here about how things kind of changed after COVID and a lot of, and what you said to me was that, we don't know, nobody knows what's going on some of the time. Would you kind of elaborate on that? Like, what are we dealing with in real estate right now?
Sure. Well, what you and I were talking about earlier, COVID, approximately 5 years going now. Before COVID, it was pretty much the same business for my 33, 34 years in business. Up some months, some down some months, up some years, down some years. Mortgage rates go up a little, mortgage rates go down a little. When the COVID hit, the whole market changed. It was a seller's market no matter what. We never heard of majority of listings selling over asking price. That became fact. We never heard to get an agreement through, the buyer would have to waive inspections and pay over asking price. That became the norm. So very much the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. From the realtor's perspective, what changed? So that's like market, generally what everybody's dealing with. But like, what did you have to do operating as a realtor to adapt to this situation? What were things that you had to go through?
Well, to adapt to the situation, I think that you had to really have your act together when it came to representing a buyer. It was probably easier than ever to represent a seller because all you had to do was put it up for sale and put a sale sign on it, and your fellow realtors are going to bring you agreements, and you had to have skill to negotiate and let your seller know what multiples we're offering. But the big difference is when we were sitting down with the buyer, we always have a buyer meeting to let them know what they're going to have to go through to get a home. But it's been very difficult the last 3-4 years. We had to tell them, we're not allowed to say recommend to waive inspections, but we have to tell them, if you don't waive inspections, probably somebody will. And if you don't pay 5 to 10% over the asking price, you probably won't get it. So the hardest thing is sitting down with a first or second time home buyer, or even an $1.5 million home buyer, and tell them what they would have to do to get this home.
Are we finding somewhat of an equilibrium now in the market? Is it kind of getting back to not 100% back to the way it was, but is it getting back to a more manageable place for buyers?
I wouldn't call it a more manageable yet. It's still a good time to be a buyer. Because interest rates are floating around 6.25, so that's affordable. But as far as affordability, prices are still going up. We see a house that, a year ago would have sold for $600,000 today in the Westchester area. Today it's probably going to sell for $700,000 to $750,000. So, you see on the news, they talk about property values going up 3 to 5%. We're talking 10 to 20%.
Let's say Kit's running the real estate economy. What would you think would be a solution you would explore to potentially address the affordability in housing issue?
Well, the word affordability is brought up every time. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's political, if it's non-political. They talk about getting affordable housing. They talk about having working people be able to afford to live where they work and buy a house, not just rent an apartment. I honestly don't see how that can happen. Land costs are more than ever. Materials cost more than ever. Labor isn't going down. So how do we create affordable housing? I think it's very difficult. I think if any politician or myself or you could figure out what it is, we're going to be very wealthy people. But I don't think we have the answer, and I don't even know if there is an answer.
Now, I had on a custom home builder on the show a few episodes back, and one of the things that I asked him was, I hear from people that it's not financially viable for builders to make affordable housing anymore. I hear arguments on both sides of the aisle. Do you see that being the case from what you know?
Well, you're a builder. You're in the business to make a profit. So if it costs the builder $500,000 to sell the house, he's going to want to sell the house for $600,000 or more. If it takes you $600,000 to build the house, you can't sell it for $600,000.
Right.
And that's the problem we're seeing it. We're seeing it locally, both with apartments as well as a primary housing that you'll own, is townships and municipalities and the boroughs, they want more affordable rentals. The problem of it is the cost to build the apartment buildings are going up, they're not going down. So it's very difficult to say we're going to reduce the rents to make them affordable.
So when I shoot homes, right, and we go to some neighborhoods and we see some of the older homes that are, in the under 2,000 square feet, right? Builders don't seem to be building homes that size anymore. Now, yeah, if they build something that's 3,000 square feet, yeah, they're probably going to be up there. I wonder if it's like, is it just we're not going to see developments, like we'll never see that again? The developments where they're in that that square footage that might make because it's like, okay, if I build a 3,000 square foot house and it costs me 500, I got to charge 6 or 7, like you said, right? But if I build something that's like 1,500 or whatever that would be, let's say it costs me 3 or 4, then it should, in theory, bring down the price. But do you think that we're dealing with the builders just not wanting to deal in that price range? And that's kind of, maybe it, and that's just part of what it is.
I think builders would be glad to deal in that price range if they could make it make sense.
Yeah.
Personally, with the cost of labor, the cost of materials going up, et cetera, I think the only way we can make affordable housing or even affordable rentals is changing the zoning. For an example, 20 years ago, most of the municipalities around the Westchester area were 1 to 2 acre zoning. And then municipalities made it where they lot averaged, where they let you build a house on 1/3 of an acre and you had open space. So they could build 4 houses on 1 acre rather than only being able to build 1 house on an acre. That'll make the houses more affordable because if the builder can build 4 houses on 1 acre rather than 1 house on 1 acre, certainly they should be able to make the price of the home less because they can build so many more homes within the tract of ground they have.
So there's just a lot of factors here that are causing this. This isn't just the builder saying, hey, we're not willing to go cheaper, and this isn't, we got labor, you're talking zoning, there's the financing aspect of it. There just seems like there's a ton of stuff here.
No, it's the hypothesis is very complicated. How do you come up with the end result? But I still feel it's what you pay for it and what you can sell it for. And that doesn't matter if you're talking about a bicycle being imported from China for $100 and with a tariff now it's going to be $180 and now you got to sell it for $250 instead of $150. It all comes about how do you market the property and make a profit. A builder is not going to, as I just previously said, isn't going to spend $1 million building a house and selling it for $800,000.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Now, you also mentioned some stuff with rentals. Some people talk about us moving towards a society where we're going to be a majority renters. Do you agree with that?
I unfortunately don't want to agree with it because it's going to be tough to pay my mortgage if that comes about, although I do plenty of rentals. Some realtors don't like doing rentals. We enjoy doing rentals. It's fun. You get to know the people, and many times they end up being home buyers. But the problem with the rentals is that they're going up just like home prices are. For an example, in the Borough of Westchester, if you want to be at one of the large high-rise with underground parking and a yoga workout room, and you're going to pay for a two-bedroom $2,800 to $3,200. That's a lot of money.
A lot of money.
And the big deal is we were just talking to one of our first-time home buyers, you're throwing the money away. At least if you had a $3,500 mortgage payment, a portion of that is tax deductible, and you're hoping that your equity is growing in the property, the sticks and bones that you have in the property. Whereas in a rental, you don't have equity, you don't have anything other than pay the rent, and it goes out the window. But yes, if you look at national statistics, the first-time home buyers is shrinking to all-time lows. And you're seeing people both at my age group, baby boomers, or the young people like you, they're turning to rentals for a couple reasons. One, they're not tied down to a mortgage. You're very flexible. You can move, you can travel, you can do whatever you want. And you just don't have to stay in that house.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I mean, so many things in society are changing right now. All right, let's shift for a second and talk about realtors and their end of the industry. So what are some areas that agents need to focus on getting good at right now if they're not already seasoned?
Isn't that interesting? Well, we have more realtors than we've ever seen before. When I was the chairman of the board for the local real estate association, there was about 5,500 agents. And then we merged with Montgomery County and we went up. So today, in a very difficult market with the inventory being better, but it's still lower than ever, we have almost 10,000 realtors at the local association. That's our local association.
Wow.
So if you take the number of homes that are available to sell and the number of realtors that we have selling them, it's very difficult to be a high-producing realtor today. It takes a lot of skills. But if I were to say anything, and I've always said this, I think two of the most important things that you can have to be successful in this business is to be preparation. That means do your homework. And second, have empathy. See what they're going through. If it's a seller going through a divorce, or if it's a buyer being a first-time home buyer or a second-time home buyer, be prepared and have empathy for the situation.
Be prepared for sure. I remember back when I had my license, right? When I joined the Realtor Association, it was Suburban West back then, and they did like the new Realtor orientation, and they give you kind of like the short class on the agreement of sale and things like that. There's paperwork that I think, even just from the paperwork aspect, I think there's a lot of agents that ignore a lot of it until they have to sign it to hand it in. What is it? Is it an educational thing? Is it mentorship? Is it like, somebody getting out of real estate school right away, on paper, they know a lot, but they don't really know anything. So how would an agent start getting knowledgeable and getting prepared, as you say, if they're new?
Well, that's very difficult. I mean, that's why we have a thing called teams today. In the 90s, you hardly saw any teams. My team was one of the first to be in the area, and I started my team in 1997. There really wasn't teams. From what I understand, teams were created because people were becoming realtors, and there really weren't mentors out there. If you were a successful realtor and you could share your knowledge with a potential top-producing agent, they didn't have the time or wanted to make the time. So what they did is they had a team, and the team leader was supposedly to be available, to be your mentor, to answer your questions and grow. I have a small team, only 6 of us on the team, and my phone still rings all the time from my team members asking me questions, how should I deal with this particular situation? That's part of my job description. So if I received a call from one of my agents, she's been on the team for about 8.5 years, very knowledgeable, very sharp. She still calls me to make sure she's doing the right thing. So I think that to answer your question, you either need a mentor, you need to go to a brokerage firm, like Berkshire Hathaway, that has a top manager that they can call and ask a question, or you need to be on a team so you have a team leader that's there for you 24/7.
Being that you've run a team for a while, what do you need to have in place as a team lead and just some structure for creating a team to actually make it have success?
Well, everything in business, if you're opening up a pizza shop or you're starting a real estate team, everything is you have to have your structure and things in line. You can't do it from the seat of your pants. We see it all the time in real estate where people are doing the same thing over and over, but different. We deal with too many realtors anymore that are both with a brokerage firm or on a team that the left and right hand doesn't know what they're doing. They delegate it so many times, they don't know that it's already been done. So I think structure and organization is probably one of the most important things, and you need somebody in charge to implement it properly.
So obviously you're working hard being a team lead. That just comes, I understand that from running my own business, but has it been worth it being a team rather than a solo agent? Would you do it again if you could go back? Would you have started a team or would you have stayed solo?
Back in the 90s, before I started the team, I went into business in 1987. I was fortunate to be so-called one of the top 2 or 3, many times number 1, agents in the area. Fellow agent who is retired, her and I, Chris Gomez, went back and forth all the time. Her sons have a team. They're fantastic. They're still in the business, but Chris is retired. But it was always between Chris and I who were so-called number 1. The reason I started a team was because I couldn't take care of the business. At that time, fortunately, and I wish it would come back, I couldn't take care of all the business. So
you were adding pieces that you needed to help you progress.
Yeah. So I'm referring a client to a fellow realtor and getting a 25% referral fee only because I didn't have enough time to take care of that client. So I created a team so that I could take care of all my clients. So for an example, if I had a new buyer come on board and I already was working with enough buyers where I didn't have enough time to take care of them, I could then give it to one of my team members and let them take care of that particular buyer.
Okay. And then it would still, I guess one of the benefits to that is it's still you taking care of them. You're still able to make sure that they're getting taken care of the way you would want them to get taken care of.
Yeah, well, my team is doing my core value and my philosophy. And then even though I don't make as much money as if I sold that individual or listed that individual's property myself, I still get a cut. So that gives me a little more income, and then part of that will help pay the bills for the team.
Sure.
You know, there was a well-known realtor back in my days of being coached by Howard Britton, and Ginny Ding-a-ling Lang. She was one of the top realtors in Chicago. And I remember at one of our conventions, she said, "Kit, we either ditch it, do it, or delegate it. And we don't want to ditch anything. So we can't do everything, so you have to delegate it."
I love that. Has there been something that you've learned through your years in real estate that has taught you a life lesson? Doesn't have to be real estate. Maybe just taught you something about people or about yourself that you think has been a good thing that's stuck with you.
I think one of the things that I've seen in real estate, and there are some brokerage firms that are pushing their reason to come with them, is because they're teaching you how to build wealth. They're teaching you how to buy real estate since you're involved in it every day, and make it a way for you to retire properly where you can then live off of the income coming in. One of the things that I think that I have learned and seen, if you can see the value of that real estate, both as an investment for yourself, your clients, or for the seller selling or the buyer buying, is you can build your wealth through real estate. So if there's really anything that I've learned, and one of my team members, Debbie West, I know she said to me about 20 years ago when she came on the team, she was getting divorced at the time, and she says, "What do you think I ought to do, Kit?" And I said, "Learn to be the best realtor you can, but try to buy an investment property every year." And she's just about did that.
Wow. That's awesome. You mentioned empathy and how important that is in the business. Can you talk a little bit about the from your clients' perspectives where their realtor having empathy is important and understanding, not just in there for a paycheck, and actually understand that this is a big deal for people when they're buying or selling a home?
Yeah, empathy is a confusing word. I mean, it's really difficult for me when I get multiple offers and I look at them. And let's say I have 5 multiple offers, which is very common today. And 4 of the 5 agents I know well and I respect. So that means I got to disappoint 3 or 4 of them. I don't want to disappoint any of my fellow realtors. So what you need to do is have the empathy and that you're making the best decision for your fiduciary, for your client. And if they recognize that, they can't get upset with you. And then on the buyer side, where the empathy comes in, I think you have to look at it. If you have a first-time home buyer, their strength on finances may not look as strong as the other agreement, but they're as approved as that other agreement. They're just not as strong financially. So if that person on the left with 3 children can afford to pay the mortgage, just aren't as strong, don't have $1 million in the bank, versus a person who has $1 million in the bank, but they're still getting a mortgage, I think you have to be able to understand both of them are pretty similar agreements. One is not that much stronger because they could afford a much more expensive house. And I see that a lot when I'm writing an agreement and I'm talking to the other agent about showing the value of our agreement, and they're bringing up, well, the other one has so much money, but it doesn't make any more qualified than my agent. So I think, than my client. So I think that's where the empathy, you have to look at the big picture.
That's great. All right, let's take sellers first. And what I want to do with this part of the conversation is I want to find a couple areas that we can actually provide some value to a seller that might be listening, right? What are 3 areas or subject matters that sellers need to pay attention to or consider when they're getting ready to enter the market?
Well, that's sellers are yellers and buyers are liars. So anyway, I'm being yelled at all the time. Well, one of the things is we can't sell it for less than this. I have 2 listings going on right now. So the first thing that we tried to tell, and you said 3 things, so I'll try to come up with 3 or eliminate 27 down to 3. So the one of it is for them to understand their house is worth what a buyer is willing to pay and what they are willing to take. It doesn't matter how much they owe. It doesn't matter how much they pay or how much they have to get to leave their children a nest egg. So number 1 is be realistic in what your property is worth. And in this market, many times, we don't know what it's worth. And most of the times, because we're on the seller side, it's worth more than they ever thought it would be worth anyway. So it's not that hard to represent the seller on number 1, which is what their house is going to sell for.
Let's stay there for a second. So with, now I know there's always those tough sellers that are just like, this is what it is. And if you want to work, if you want to represent me, this is what we're selling the house for. And then the agent has to decide, is this make sense for me, right? But for a seller that is looking for the guidance, some of the actual value that agents bring to the table, what needs to be explained to a seller that might be listening, how you can go about determining that price, or at least a ballpark of where they need to be? Like, what does an agent look at to help them, to guide them in pricing?
As we mentioned earlier, things have changed for 37 years. I looked at comparables. And we took those comparables and we said, okay, this is what the competition is selling for in the area or in the neighborhood. This is what the interest rate is. This is what the inventory is. And you put 1 and 1 and 2 together and you come up, your neighbor's house sold for $1 million and it didn't have a new kitchen, yours does. The other house sold for this, the other house sold for that. So you come up with the price. That's not the case anymore.
How do you tell a seller that wants to I think it's changing. It's moving more towards that you can kind of gauge with comps a little better than you have been in the last like handful of years. But like during the peak of all the craziness, how could you tell a seller that wanted to go 50K, 100K over ask no when you as an agent weren't sure they weren't going to get it?
Well, what we try to educate our sellers are today is that you're going to get more for your house than you ever would have in your entire life. Now, 6 months ago, would you maybe have gotten 1 or 2% more? Yes. Would you maybe have had less contingencies on the agreement? Yes. But please keep in mind, you are getting more when we settle than ever in history. Okay. Now, one of the things that I say that I think has changed, what a prime listing agent does is try to price it to get the appointments immediately. And the buyer will tell you what your house is worth and most likely will be higher because you'll get multiple offers or get more interest. That's the one thing that has really changed over the years. If you can come up with that magic number and get a lot of appointments out of the box and get multiple offers, you will get more than your house is worth than I would tell you if I went the old-fashioned comp way.
What about home prep? I see it when we go to shoot properties that some people are just like slap their house on the market, don't do anything to get it ready. Where do you stand on doing that at all versus like how important is it or not?
Boy, I could go on for an hour on that. That is so interesting. Now, I think many of my fellow realtors and even coaches would disagree with what my opinion is. Okay. I say to my sellers, the market we're in means put it on the market at the right price, and you're going to get a top price for it regardless. That's not the way I would have talked before. I declutter, get pictures off the wall, get the stager in, cut the grass, mulch, trim the bushes. We would say you have to do that. Anymore, I really don't think you have to do that because it's such a seller's market. Okay. People want to buy houses. So as long as you price it in the right price range and it's in the desirable area, try to put your best foot forward. But do I think you need to, on some properties you do. We just had one in Malvern that we had to redo everything because after we had it on the market 2 weeks, we knew the buyers weren't going to accept it. So we just spent a good bit of money over a 10-day period, and it sold in 1 day. Made a difference.
Yeah, no, for sure. What is Kit Anstey's take on pre-listing inspections?
Again, I think it's a good idea, and I think it's a bad idea. Now, here's the good idea. The good idea, especially if you have an on-site septic, I mean, a septic's going to cost you $25,000 to $50,000. There's some sellers that won't sell if they had to spend $25,000 to $50,000 to put a septic in. So many times we sit down and we say to them, how about if your septic fails? Are you still going to want to sell or can you? But I think the question you're asking is more for a home inspection so that you know. I personally, even though many of the people and realtors and managers I know that I respect, they feel pre-listing inspections is a good idea. The reason I personally don't, I've seen a home and I've seen 2 or 3 inspections on that home, and you would have thought all 3 of them were different properties.
Yeah.
So if there was a universal way, white or black, 1 and 1 is 2, I would like it. The trouble with it is it's a human being looking at that property and they look at it differently. Matt, our manager, just told us a story. He had a sale recently, 2 weeks ago, and the inspector said it needed a new roof. And he said, geez, I don't know how it could need a new roof, blah, blah, blah. He went and looked at the roof. The inspector was looking at an old leak in the attic. Now, we're not saying every inspector would have made that mistake, but that was a $20,000 mistake.
Yeah.
So personally, no, I would say let the buyer pay for them if you have to have them.
Okay. I want to provide a alternate perspective that I hear from some people just to get your thoughts on it. So I have one client in particular that's very big on the pre-listing inspection because he, in his opinion, the way he approaches it, it helps the buyer focus on price and not what's wrong with the house as part of that. So because they at least have some kind of heads up, and especially in the market that we've been in with inspections being waived, providing that, even if it's just for buyer's knowledge, helped people get over like, hey, I don't know what's wrong with this house. What do you think on that take?
Again, that's why I said I understand both sides of it.
Yeah.
We recently sold a house, and like a good realtor should do, there was a prior inspection. It was from a deal that fell through. It wasn't a pre-listing inspection, but same thing. That means you have a home inspection before you put your agreement in. And we looked at that inspection. We go, geez, it's very odd the way they're looking at the stucco. Okay. They didn't say get a stucco inspector. They made their own opinion of the repairs, which we didn't think it was done properly. And we know that if we had an inspection, our stucco inspection would have looked at that particular issue totally differently. So that's why I think respect that person's opinion. But again, I think on the other side, you can come up and say, yeah, I see why you wouldn't.
Yeah. That's no. I mean, I think that's also a good take. Just even going through all of that, like your perspective, because it's funny. I ask some questions the same to different realtors, get different answers all the time. But I think the fact that you're able to look at that goes back to again why some sellers choose to like, oh, I'm going to sell it myself because you're saving commission. But if they don't do it all the time and they don't have somebody with the experience, such as what you bring to the table. I mean, so let's take that to, should everybody have a realtor?
I love transparency. I love telling the truth. I feel it's like if you go to the dentist, they're going to take care of your teeth. This is the most expensive thing, decision you will make in your life. Why do you want to try to mess it up on your own? So yes, I think definitely they need a realtor. I don't think, which we see people doing it, well, my lawyer's going to take care of it. My best clients are lawyers. They don't ask me or don't tell me, this is what I want you to do, Kit. They say, Kit, would you list my house? Oh, I have a client. They're going through this issue. What do you think we should do? Even some of the best lawyers, they call a realtor because they know that's our expertise. The National Association of Realtors, I used to know it. I don't remember it anymore. But they show how much less a for sale by owner or somebody handling the documents themselves get than if, in fact, they use a realtor. We just recently had a flip. We took a flip to one of our really good clients, and it was going to be put on the market a month ago. And they said, oh, one of our relatives want to buy it. And I said, we wouldn't get upset. You've been a good client. We appreciate it. I said, but if you wouldn't mind, use our title company. So they did use our title company. They went to settlement last week. Yes, they sold it for less because they didn't have to pay commission. But in our opinion, they left money on the table because they didn't give it a chance to go to the market and let the buyers set the price. In our opinion, that price after paying the commission, if it was 5.5, or 6, they still would have, secret word to the seller, netted more money than they did not using a realtor.
Yeah. I saw a stat. It's 11.5% more that people were netting when using a realtor. So even if you're paying 6% commission, you're still coming out 5.5% over.
Yeah. So you've answered my question. If you can get 5.5 to 11% more using the expert, why wouldn't you do that? I think that expertise is needed in everything. If it's auto repair, if it's buying a house, if it's going to the dentist. When I know, like when I want a doctor, my partner, she looks up to see who the best doctor is. She's not worrying about the price. She wants me to go to the person that can give us the best advice.
It's not rocket science, but it's not simple either. I always told, people when I had my license, I was like, we aren't as like, you could do this, but I said, we earn our paychecks quite in a large fashion once we go under contract, because you could put it on the market, get the offers, but all the stuff that happens from once that contract is signed to settlement, there's a lot of stuff that goes on there. And then even just the guidance and consultation that you give these people along the way. It's like, if they don't do it every day, what's the person that can you think off the top of your head, a client that you've had that you've had the most transactions with? How many was that? Like double digits?
Oh, sure. Many of them double digits. Sure. I can think off the top of my head a client we went to settlement with last year and tell you what he said at the settlement table, which made me feel so good. And we probably did 18 transactions with him and his wife in the last 8 years. Mm-hmm. And we were at the settlement table, and my partner Debbie and I had both sides of his $1.7 million plus house, and his buyer, we had the listing side for that $1 million plus house and his investment property. So the commissions were pretty hefty at that table.
Yeah.
And I said to him, we want to thank you for letting us represent both you and the buyer, and you had the confidence. He said, best money I ever spent.
Yeah.
That made me feel pretty good because that check was pretty large.
Wow. The average person, I just looked it up, the average person completes 3 home transactions in a lifetime. And you figure, I think I saw somewhere else that it was like 13 and a half years is the average time currently that somebody's spending in a house. How much changes in 13 years in like how things are done in real estate?
Well, I think the market is so different. As I mentioned to you before we went on air, I get 1 to 2 calls a week or every 10 days from managers, team leaders, or other agents, and they ask me a question, and they say, you're so experienced, Kit, what do you think about this? And I say, honestly, since the pandemic and the last 3 years, we're all new in this business. Mm-hmm. We have never seen anything like this. In my 33, 34 years in the business before the pandemic, I don't ever remember selling a house over asking price. I didn't remember one of thinking back. No, maybe I did, but certainly not many.
Yeah.
Of the last 3-4 years, probably on the buyer side, 90% of the sales have been over asking price, not to mention the terms that I had to recommend or suggest to the buyer today. So everything is so different. And then had a great seller about 5 months ago, was trying to sell his house on his own for about 2-3 months. And he was asking $1.8 million, couldn't sell it. We knew some people looking at it. Had me over and I said, yeah, I'd like to list your property. He said, well, I'd like to get $1.8 million, Kit. And I said, well, I know you'd like to get $1.8 million because I know people you told them that they can buy it for $1.8 million. I said, let's list it for $1.75 million. He said, but I want to get $1.8 million. I said, I think you're going to get $1.8 million. But I think what we need to do is let's do it so that we can have the excitement. Sold that house first day, multiple offers, over $2 million.
Were they happy?
They got wrinkles from smiling.
That's good. All right, let's shift it over to buyers. You brought up the 50-year mortgage idea that's been floating around. What are your thoughts on that?
Shoot it with a big, bad gun. That is one ugly thing. So let's just take it real simple. And we've probably seen it in the news, many of us. So take a $400,000 property, put 10% down. Your mortgage on a 50-year mortgage is going to be about $2,100.
Right.
On a 30-year mortgage, it's going to be about $2,400. So that's $300, $3,600 a year. Your interest you're going to pay on that 30-year mortgage, if you stayed there for 30 years, and very few people ever do, but let's say you did, you're going to pay a little under $500,000 in interest.
Yeah.
If you take the 50-year mortgage, and you'll probably die before you would have the 50 years, But let's say you did live, you're going to pay almost $900,000 in interest. So how does that make any sense?
Does that make it? Would that also make it harder to sell the house? Having that on there?
I don't think it'll make harder to sell the house, but I do think it's going to be harder not to be underwater when you sell the house.
Right. I guess that's what I mean.
Yeah, sure it's going to be, because if you do a 15-year mortgage, a 30-year mortgage, or a 50-year mortgage, the interest that you pay is front-loaded in the beginning of the payment.
Right.
So for the beginning number of years, you're paying majority of it is interest, and not till you get later in the middle to the later of the mortgage are you paying more principal than interest. So that you said the average person moves like every 11 and a half years. Honestly, I think it's 6, but I could be wrong. But regardless of which one it was or is that if in fact you only live there 6 or 7 years and you have a 50-year mortgage, with paying interest the majority of those 6 years, even if your house appreciates 10, 15%, you might owe more money after expenses than your home is worth, even with appreciation.
And what if it goes down for something, if something happens?
And it's got to happen one of these days, doesn't it? So if it goes down underwater, and we used to see that all the time in the 90s and the early 2000s. People, bought their house for X, and when they sold it, their net was too high.
I like the fact that that there's some attention on the situation for people, because it is hard for some people to be able to come up with the money and make these homes, get into these homes. That's not a good idea. I agree with you. But I think it's at least, I like that there is conversation being had. They need to come up with a better idea.
Well, what they're trying to do, and you asked a question earlier, is they're trying to make affordable housing.
Right.
And making a dumb decision to make it more affordable is not a good decision. Right. And I think that is a dumb decision. What I think, and my partner Debbie and I, we're dealing with 3 or 4 first-time home buyers. We've been begging them and schooling them for 6 months to change their wish list, because what your wish list is getting harder, if not impossible, to get. Because we have so many of the young people, they said, I want a 2-car garage, I want a yard, I want a fence, I want a single, I don't want a townhouse. Well, you know what makes home buying more affordable today is go to a townhouse. I know you want a single, but if you go to a townhouse, it makes it more affordable. But we just have a lot of potential buyers. They still are fighting the townhome community. Now, isn't that interesting? The baby boomer or the over 55 person who has a lot of money and a lot of equity, they're paying, in this area, $850 and up for an over 55, because that's what it costs. And most of them are townhomes. Now, some are singles. Now, like for an example, the singles in the Woodlands at Greystone, where you have 7 or 8 on an acre, they're selling for over $1 million in the over 55 community.
Yeah, that's crazy. That is such a popular neighborhood right now. Now, do you think that for younger people that are like, have this wish list that you're talking about? Years ago, people, like my parents and whatnot, they buy a home. Maybe it's not their first home, but they got into their quote unquote dream home, and they're going to ride it out, right? But do you think the expectation of finding that forever home is maybe some of the problem, and they need to realize that they may buy 2, 3, 4 homes before they get to that, and then maybe that can help shift mindset a little bit?
To be honest with you, I have not seen a lot of that. It may be they're not sharing that with me, but what we tried to show them, this is probably a 3 to a 5 year commitment for you. We just lost a property to one of our buyers, and my partner and I, who was on this transaction, we were begging them to buy this property because on a scale of 1 to 10, it was a 7.5. And they were so close. Unfortunately, they had influence from outside that swayed them not to do it. So here it is, almost a month later, they're still looking for a house. Prices are still staying the same or going up. Not the inventory that they want, so they might have to rent for another year. I think that what people need to do to get a house today is not look, and I don't think they are, Brian, honestly, they're not looking to say, this is where we're going to live forever, because that's why we want our wish list. I think if they think that they were going to be there for that long of a time, they would be able to live more with remodeling bathrooms and a kitchen and putting an addition on or something. I think that today, the younger people like you, unlike the baby boomer like me, we never had a problem of looking to fix things up. Today, most of our younger buyers, if it's first-time home buyer or not, they want turnkey.
I was just having a conversation with somebody yesterday where I was talking about it. When I grew up, we lived in Upper Darby. It was a row house. It was 3 bedrooms. So, that covers you for the parents and 2 kids to have their own room. When my third brother came along, not my third, my second brother came along, we ended up doing the bunk bed situation in one room. And then, I notice a lot of times when I'm shooting houses and I see like the kid situation that these people are living in, it's like they jump to the next house before they run out of bedrooms. It's like they don't get the most out of where they're at currently. And I guess that's kind of somewhat of what I was kind of getting at, maybe from a different angle, but that it's just everybody. It's like everybody has to have the latest and greatest iPhone. It's like I have, one kid now, we need a bigger house. And it's like, I get it. You want all that. But I think some people would do well to be a little more patient, I guess, as time goes on.
One of the things that I see in the older days, I don't know what I mean the older days, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, me being in the business 37, 38 years, I've been around the block a lot. But there was a time everybody wanted to be better than the Joneses. Mm-hmm. So when I sold my one friend that house, my other friend who was going to live in that neighborhood, he wanted a bigger one, he wanted a prettier one. But there was a time, yes, where everybody wanted to do bigger and better than the other. Today, or recently, the last 5-10 years, I haven't seen that. It's more that they're just trying to be able to get something.
Fair enough. One thing that I still feel like holds true is, how they say that, like, okay, when once one sold sign or for sale sign goes up in a neighborhood, that it's like other people start selling. I still think that holds true. Because I've seen some neighborhoods that we've done, like we did one and then like, okay, I just did one next door to that one in this one neighborhood and then another one. Do you think that still holds true?
I think it holds true really importantly when it shows the neighbor that they have more equity than they thought. There's a development in the Borough of Westchester, it's in East Bradford. It's very close to the Borough. We hadn't seen a resale in there for like 18 months. And then one came up for sale about a year ago, sold for a lot of money. About a month later, 2 came up for sale. Yeah. Since that first one of a year, 14 months ago, whenever, coming on the market, which was odd, there's probably 7, 8 that have settled. I think that when people see things selling for numbers they didn't realize, they're going to put it up for sale. But we still see people staying in houses longer than we ever thought. I mean, I have friends of mine that are in my age group. They've been in their house 50 years, have no thought of moving.
What's going on in the Borough? Does Kit have any inside info he can share with people? Yeah.
Put that fire out, guys. Yeah. Are you kidding me? Yeah, the Borough's oceanfront, that's for sure. And it doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned this before, just about 6 months ago, the highest price home that ever sold in the Borough, a single family residence, was right around $1,950,000, a house on North Walnut Street in the Borough. In the last 6 months, 5 homes over $2 million.
5. So you had the first one, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Yep. I hope we can say I set that pace, but 5 homes in the last less than 6 months. Over $2 million. So what's that show you? That shows you that people want to live in the Borough. I had an appraiser call me 4 or 5 days ago and said, Kit, here's a little modest 3-bedroom, 2-bath Cape right around the corner from where you sold your house for $2,050,000. They want me to appraise it at $1,050,000 because they said somebody's going to knock it down and build a house on it. And I said, well, they probably will knock it down and build a house on it, but they're not going to pay $1.5 million for a building lot. So to answer your question about the borough's like Avalon and Stone Harbor. People want to live there, and we don't have enough inventory. We probably sold half a dozen in the last 6 months, and prices, I think, are excellent, but I don't think they're ridiculous. For an example, we just sold a duplex on South New Street in the borough, sold it in a couple days, two-bedroom, one-bath apartments, a duplex, no parking, sold for $50,000 over asking price, $630,000. It's not a crazy number. Two two-bedroom apartments. We're going to settlement. Be honest with you, same owner on West Chestnut Street. A nice 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 2-powder room, twin, no parking, $557,000. So high numbers, but still don't seem crazy to me.
So we've seen taller buildings go up in Westchester, like, with the new hotel and things like that. Do you think that the borough starts building up at some point?
Oh, I have really mixed feelings about the way the borough is going. One of my good friends and clients is responsible for many of the improvements that have made the borough what it is. Eli Kahn and the Zukin family. I'm happy to say the Zukin family, who just did the Indigo Hotel, 15 years. I went to Borough Council with them 15 years ago to get that to be a hotel. It took them 15 years to
That's been in the works that long?
Been in the works that long. Yep, 15 years. So I'm real happy on the corner. It's now called Zukin Way.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, you had visionary people like Eli and the Zukin family, and they've made us come to what we are. And now we have new players coming in town. We'll see what happens. A lot of restaurants, some of them closing, which we don't like that. We hadn't seen that in a long time.
Yeah.
But, the boroughs, I live in the borough. I walk up and down the streets every night. It's amazing. It's like the old days of Atlantic City Boardwalk. It's busy.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll come up on the end here, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about creating your brand, right? I know people, I don't think I know anybody in the business that doesn't know who you are.
Hallelujah.
But also even around town, even people who aren't realtors. There's so many people that know you. And I mean, when we went out and did that little bit of video shooting during the restaurant festival, you knew like almost everybody that was down there. People used to say, kids, people have mentioned to me about how, you're always, a lot of times you're in a suit, you're always professional, you're just that guy. How did you curate this person that is Kit Anstey, or is it just you?
Well, thanks for the compliment. That's nice. Well, I think if you're in the same place for a long time, you can't help it. People are going to know who you are. If you're the dog on the corner for 2 years, they're going to know what that dog is on the corner. So I'm kind of that guy. I've been in the borough for so long. I graduated from Henderson a long time ago, went into the retail business, had a number of clothing stores. But one of the things I think that I learned from in the first part of my life was marketing, because I was in retail. And you have to market if you're in the retail business. If you look, it doesn't matter if it's Bosco's or if it's Target or whoever it is, they have to spend money on marketing because that's part of the business. So when I had my clothing stores, I worked hard at marketing. So when I went into the real estate business, I found that I needed to market my listings, but marketing is totally different from branding. So one of the things that I said, if I'm going to brand myself and my team, we need to brand our face and everything. So if you look at 99.9% of what we market, my team, their faces are on it. And I say to my team members, the reason I do that is if you're in the supermarket or you're in a state store or you're walking down the street, we want to say, how do I know you? I saw you in a magazine. Now, if you do that enough, they're going to say, you're the realtor I saw in that magazine. So I think if, in fact, there's a reason why people recognize me, one, I've been around so long, but I've never gotten away from the marketing to brand yourself and your business. And that's what I've tried to do. I want to be known as the Realtor, not as Kit Anstey.
All right, great. Last question. We ask everybody this question. Send us off with a positive message to the world.
My positive message to the world, we're lucky to be here and it's going to get better.
I love it. Thanks, Kit.
Thank you very much.
That was
I
amazing.
appreciate it.